the world's most important oil choke point just became a battlefield. Iran has effectively blocked the Strait of Hormuz after U.S. and Israeli strikes, threatening nearly global oil shipments. And this happening as American forces destroy Iranian mines and naval vessels to reopen it. At the same time, U.S. warplanes hit 90 military targets on Iran's Karg Island, the heart of its oil exports. Josh Haston here alongside Alex Trayman. Alex, we are entering the third week of the war, the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Let's jump right out to a video of President Donald Trump saying that essentially we've won.
We've won. Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. The International Energy Agency agreed to coordinate the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from various national petroleum reserves around the world, which will substantially reduce the oil prices as we end this threat to America and this threat to the world. We don't want to leave early, do we? We got to finish the job, right? After midnight hammer, and then we left. We figured that'll be the end of them for a while. But they started again. That's why we got to finish it, right? We don't want to go back every 2 years.
Alex, I think that's really important. The president saying we're going to go full force. We can't keep going back. We can't go back every 2 years.
I think that's right. And while the president said, you know, we don't want to say it too early, I think it is really important to understand what the president of the United States is saying, what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is saying, what the Prime Minister of Israel, what the Defense Minister of Israel is saying, which is that Iran is sustaining unbelievable blows. And from the first minute, I think President Trump was right when he said the first thing, that first strike, that Saturday morning, 16 days ago, the state of Israel took out Ali Khamenei. They took out the top of the entire command structure of the Iranian regime, of this Islamic Republic. And yes, Iran is sending ballistic missiles towards Israel and towards targets all over the rest of the Middle East. But, you know, they are just spraying missiles. And whatever they hit, they do some damage. Iran has sustained well over 1,000 direct hits on strategic targets. And if anybody thinks that Iran is going to come out as the victor of this war, they are just, they're just slopping up the propaganda, Josh.
Alex, I want to go right to this clip of Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Just an unbelievable clip. Let's check it out.
Looking up, the IRGC and Iranian regime sees only two things on the side of aircraft: the Stars and Stripes and the Star of David. The evil regime's worst nightmare.
There you have it, Alex. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I think what you are seeing here is that Israel's stock is really rising, okay? That there are two superpowers in the world that are willing to fight against terror threats, the entire world, and those are the United States of America and the State of Israel. These two countries are working side by side. They are, you know, flying together. They are hitting targets strategically, each according to their strength, and I think the results demonstrate. And we've actually seen maybe some U.S. planes gone down. We haven't seen any Israeli planes go down. Okay, Israel is the strongest. I don't want to say the strongest because in terms of quantity and the equipment, the United States is definitely dramatically stronger than the State of Israel. It's not even close. But when it comes to the precision, the perfection, the State of Israel just is in a league of their own in terms of their pilots, and the stock is rising. When these two powers work together, there's no way that a rogue terror regime like the Islamic Republic of Iran, even with their terror axis of Hezbollah, the Houthis, Khata'ib, Hezbollah, Hamas, whoever wants to get involved, they don't stand a chance against the United States and the State of Israel, and the whole world sees it.
Alex, the other day, Prime Minister Netanyahu held, I believe it was the first press conference since the beginning of the war. He talked about that unprecedented level of coordination between Israel and the U.S., spoke about the accomplishments. He said, we took out Khamenei, the nuclear infrastructure, the missile arrays, launchers, targeting the headquarters of the terrorist regime there in Iran. And the Prime Minister said with certainty, this is no longer the same Iran. And he also said it's not the same Middle East and no longer the same Israel, which I thought was very fascinating.
The prime minister looked fantastic. This wasn't his first press remarks. He's given various remarks to the country at different times. This is the first time he took questions from reporters. And some of the questions from reporters were not even related to the war in Iran. They were related to the president calling for a pardon for Netanyahu and other questions, of which the prime minister, he just went off on that. Talked about the president of the United States can say whatever he wants. He can do what's in his heart. But I thought that Netanyahu looked amazing. And what was incredible about it is that I typed in Netanyahu. I wanted to see that presser that he did. I wanted to see if there was an English language translation, which we could maybe get here for the show. I typed in Netanyahu and Iran, and countless results come up saying that Netanyahu was dead.
Yeah.
Okay, just video after video saying that Netanyahu was dead. A week earlier, they had said that Netanyahu's brother Ido was dead. Guess what? Prime Minister Netanyahu is not dead. His brother Ido is not dead. Okay, the prime minister was fantastic, even addressing reporters' questions late last week. Who is dead? Ali Khamenei is dead. And there's a good chance that Mojtaba Khamenei, Ali Khamenei's son, is dead because we haven't seen him. He gave this statement to the press that was read by an anchor, basically saying, oh, I didn't even know that I was appointed supreme leader. I found out from my hospital bed. And the question is, why is Iran doing that? Because they want to show that this regime is still in place, even though the whole thing is crumbling, right before them. And you see here weakness and you see strength. You see weak Iran, flailing, and you see the United States and Israel working with a lot of confidence, but also with great methodology. And you're also seeing how both countries are ramping up the military operations, not scaling down. They didn't come with everything that they had on the first day. Like Iran, for example, fired the most amount of ballistic missiles on day one. And now we're seeing that they're firing approximately 30 ballistic missiles a day. Now, I don't want to minimize what that means. I mean, that is a threat that needs to be nipped in the bud. Iran cannot have the power to fire even one ballistic missile a day. But when you talk about the threat, what Iran was supposedly able to possess and do to Israel, they're firing 30 a day right now. That is a tiny, tiny fraction of what the assessments were that they could have done, not just before this round, but before previous rounds. And we'd seen in the last 12-day war, I think they fired 500 ballistic missiles at Israel. But we had seen even before Operation Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer that they had fired almost 100 in a day previously back in April 24 and October 24. So here they're firing just a few. The regime is crushed. The infrastructure is crushed. I mean, remember seeing Israel hit that oil infrastructure in Iran, apocalyptic scenes, black smoke all over Iran. You had flaming fire going down the gutters of Iranian streets. It was unbelievable. I mean, what Israel is doing, they are picking apart this regime that has threatened the entire region. And it's really incredible to watch.
Alex, also part of that press conference, I think this is just really exemplifies the spirit of the Israeli people and what we're all about. Netanyahu said that President Trump said to him in amazement, only in Israel are the rescue flights reversed. Everywhere in the world, people want to flee from war zones, and only in Israel, everyone wants to return. And you had a correspondent here from Ma'ariv, which is not necessarily pro-Netanyahu.
The opposite.
The opposite, yeah, exactly. I was putting it mildly, admitting that I'm here. His name is Avi Benayahu, a correspondent, saying, I don't really hand out praise to governments so readily, but I need to give praise and credit where is deserved. Specifically the Ministry of Transportation, which is organizing these rescue flights, bringing in thousands of people back to Israel into a war zone. I was stuck during the last operation, so I know what it's like to be on the other end, doing everything in my power to come back to Israel. It took me 15 days, but Israelis around the world still trying to get home who haven't already done so.
It's over 100,000 Israelis, but you would imagine that there would be a mass exodus, people trying to flee out of a country when the country comes under attack. And you see in Israel the exact opposite. And this is really the strength of the Israeli resilience, that people run to the fire. People want to be with their families during a war to protect them, to protect the country. And great job by Miri Regev and the government to and I think El Al also deserves a lot of the credit here, as well as Arkia, who brought another airline that brought people on flights into Taba,
Right.
into Egypt, and many people came across through Taba. Some flights went into Aqaba, into Jordan, and people came across. Not the safest of situations, but good job by the government of working to get all the Israelis that want to come home together. But another thing that the prime minister said, which I think is so important, he said that he's speaking to the president of the United States on a daily basis. He said they are talking about the operational considerations of the war, that they are making decisions together, right? And we had previously heard the president of the United States, when asked about when the war would end, said that he and Netanyahu would decide together when the war would end. He said the relationship has never been stronger. And he said that the two of them, they don't only discuss the present operational considerations. He said they talk about the future of the region and the future of the world, okay? That they are talking about creating the situation for future generations. This is unbelievable leadership, really, between these two. I think the two strongest leaders in the world today, potentially, in President Trump. Obviously, he's the leader of the free world, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been so criticized, so heavily criticized over the last years, and certainly after October 7th, he seemed like he was broken after that attack. But to see how he has risen to the occasion to guide Israel through this war, first against Hamas, then against Hezbollah, then against the Houthis, then back against Gaza, then against Iran, then, back in Gaza, and now again in Iran and again in Hezbollah. The way he's managed the situations, managing first President Biden, now working with President Trump. I mean, it's just unbelievable what he's managed to do. And you've also seen the Israeli force posture evolve. And again, that has a lot to do with who you started fighting the war with. In the beginning, the war was fought with the Biden administration. They were working against Netanyahu. They were, threatening weapons. They were certainly not allowing all the weapons that were supposed to come. And Israel had to figure out how to, work slowly but steadily. Also, all the pressure from the international community. Obviously, with President Trump in office, your Prime Minister Netanyahu has a much freer hand to do what he feels that Israel needs to do. But you see how now Israel recognizes that it can go all the way. In the beginning of this war, question, how far can we go? We'll take 2 steps forward. We'll take 1 step back. We'll take another step forward. We'll pause. We'll shift to another theater. Israel now recognizing they can fight on every theater at the same time if that's what they need to do, and they can go all the way. There is no holding Israel back right now if they set their mind to a military objective.
Before we continue, we'd like to share something important. Right now, Israel's under attack. Sirens are sounding, missiles are falling, families are running to bomb shelters in the middle of the night. But while the world watches the war in the sky, another battle's happening quietly on the ground, a battle for food. Millions of Israelis are living in poverty, and war is pushing more families over the edge. Meir Panim are providing hot meals, food packages, and care for those who need it the most. Please help feed the hidden victims of this war. Click on the link in the description and donate to Meir Panim today. Alex, we're going to bring up the Biden administration in just a few minutes when we discuss Hezbollah and Lebanon. But I want to talk about the situation on the ground, or rather at sea, actually. Iran effectively blocking the Straits of Hormuz, the strait used for roughly a fifth of global oil shipments. President Trump saying he's not going to have it. Also threats of perhaps those sea mines, if you will. Iran perhaps laying those mines, so ships that cross them will explode. They're essentially blocking the world's oil supply there.
Well, certainly a situation in which it's not safe for ships to pass through the straits. We saw several ships that were damaged by basically suicide speedboats, right? So you have the suicide drones in the sky, and you have these suicide speedboats that basically also, they're like unmanned little speedboats, and they just crash right into a boat. And we've seen a few vessels severely damaged. And what that means is that other vessels recognize it's not safe to go through because of the mines, because of the speedboats. Obviously, a major priority for President Trump to get the Straits of Hormuz open. As you said, if 20% of the world's oil cannot get through to where it needs to go, well, what does that do? I mean, in addition to just instability, that forces the price of oil up. This is definitely something that the President of the United States wants to avoid. You saw the clip earlier where he got the international agencies to release 400 million cubic barrels of oil, which should stem at least some of the delay. We have seen China's boats getting through. We've seen some Indian boats getting through in coordination with Iran. They can let through who they want.
Sure.
Not target who they don't want. Let them know where the mines are, where they aren't. But now you've seen the President of the United States saying, we will take out Iran's oil infrastructure. Now, in the beginning, and I mentioned a few minutes ago, when Israel bombed some of Iran's oil infrastructure, you saw reports, and we don't know how true those reports are, but we saw reports coming through that the United States was upset that Israel was hitting the oil infrastructure. Now we're seeing the President of the United States threatening to hit even more of the oil infrastructure. And we just saw over the weekend that the United States hit the Karg Island,
Yes.
Which is in the middle of the Straits. It is an island in which most of the oil that Iran produces and ships off. And they have on this relatively small island, about 25 kilometers from Iran's coast, you have an airport there, and this is where Iranian vessels load up oil and they take them out. So we've seen in the past, the Reagan administration bombed Karg Island during the Iran-Iraq war. And what's really interesting here is that you see different media reports and people challenging Pete Hegseth and others saying, you didn't realize that Iran was going to close the Straits of Hormuz. What do you mean they didn't know? Obviously, the one leverage that Iran has on the entire world, short of the nuclear weapon and the ballistic missiles, is the oil supply, the international oil supply that goes to the Straits. It's not the first time Iran has threatened to close the Straits of Hormuz. It's not the first time they have actually blocked the Straits of Hormuz. The United States obviously knew that this was a possibility. They obviously prepared for such a scenario, and you see now the United States getting set. If these straits are not effectively opened, I think that you're going to see the President of the United States, the U.S. military, bombing hard all along the seacoast, the shore of the straits, potentially more bombings on Karg Island. President Trump said that they might bomb Karg Island again just for fun. That's a quote. So we'll see what happens, but certainly this is something that the United States is prepared for, and this is part of the holding hostage of the international community that Iran has done for so many years, and something that needs to stop.
So in addition to those bombings, the U.S. and Israel also targeting the checkpoints belonging to this IRGC paramilitary militia group there in Iran. I believe it's pronounced the Basij. Basij force checkpoints there. Let's talk about the significance of that.
This is really important because on the one hand, Israel and the United States working to bomb against the nuclear facilities and also against the ballistic missile infrastructure of Iran. But ultimately, you see by the first strike, by taking out Khamenei on day one of this war, that what at least the state of Israel is saying out loud, and certainly what the United States is also working towards, is a regime change in Iran. Now, what prevents the regime change? Okay, the people of Iran, they want a regime change, and you saw millions of people protesting, and not just this year. Okay, we saw it in 2008, we've seen it at other times, but this year already, 32,000 protesters at least, with some estimates, and I've even heard the president acknowledge that it might be as much as 100,000.
Wow.
But the minimum estimates is that at least 32,000 protesters have been gunned down in the streets when they come out to revolt against this regime. Who's shooting them? The Basij. The Basij is heavily armed. They are a paramilitary that is created to prevent popular uprising in the country. They're shooting against unarmed protesters. So what Israel wants to see, and what you're hearing more and more, is talks about what will happen on the day after, and that the Iranian people have to rise up and take the regime back. What's there to prevent them is the Basij. And what we just see now for the first time Israel doing, together with the United States, is using suicide drones that are actually clones of the Iranian drones, almost a very similar type drones, and using intelligence, those drones are attacking the checkpoints where Basij is setting up to prevent people from going en masse into the streets. And now we've even seen the Besiege moving their checkpoints into tunnels. We've seen footage of this, or videos of them moving their checkpoints inside tunnels, because inside the tunnels it'll be harder for these drones to attack them. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying many times since this war began that there are surprises, that I think that these drone attacks on the besieged forces is one of those surprises. Let's see if there are more. But certainly what needs to happen is when Prime Minister Netanyahu talks about help being on the way, when the president said help is on the way, that is help to neutralize the besieged, that the Iranian people can actually rise up in the streets. And I'll tell you, even overnight, I've seen clips from Iran, and it's hard to verify like what is the actual dates of these clips, because they could have been from several weeks back when we saw the 32,000 people being gunned down in the streets, but clips of more and more people getting into the streets protesting against this regime. If they get in the streets en masse, you may start to see, and we've already seen reports of this as well, besieged members standing down from their posts, realizing that they're not going to start shooting at the Iranian people that they're supposedly supposed to protect. Also, you're starting to see members of IRGC that are supposed to be firing ballistic missiles standing down from those orders, because they know that the second that they go out to prepare the launch, that they get taken out from the sky, and they don't want to die. Some people actually do want to live. So we're seeing here that Israel creating the conditions on the ground to help the Iranian people. Help is on the way.
I heard an unbelievable interview this morning on Israeli radio about the Iranian people, and one of the representatives was saying when the people of Iran hear the planes above, the bombings going on, they're happy. And when there are times when everything's quiet, that's when they're most concerned. They're concerned at that point that Israel and the U.S. are going to stop the operation prematurely before going full force. It's unbelievable, these social media people over the world criticizing Israel and the U.S. Look what you're doing. You're bombing Iran, the poor people, this and that. They're absolutely full of garbage. The Iranian people are applauding the bombings.
Well, you see a massive misinformation campaign that Iran has been at the head of for a long time. I mean, they are at the head of it. The Qataris are at the head of it. Questions of if the Qataris, by the way, in Iran have been colluding. We saw that Qatar, they stopped producing liquefied natural gas, and now there's even rumors out there that there was a collusion, in order to drive up the prices. At the same time, while Qatar's working with the United States, also maybe hedging their bets with Iran. But Qatar and Iran, the two of those, they have been the primary pushers of the propaganda against Israel, against the United States. But ultimately, the propaganda has nothing to do with what's actually happening on the ground. Iran is a country with 100 million people, okay? And yes, do many of them support the regime? Of course, they've been brainwashed to do so. But the majority of this country doesn't want this regime in place. It's the same way that the majority of the people in Lebanon don't want Hezbollah. These are terrorist organizations that have hijacked countries. And I think that Israel and the United States are doing a tremendous job on behalf of the entire region and mankind to take these horrific hostage-holding terror organizations out in order to give peoples the opportunity to live a life where they can have economic advancement. Okay, look what this regime did to Iran. The rial trades at 1.3 million to 1. Okay, back at the time of the revolution, it was trading at 70 to 1. Okay, the currency is tanked to levels you can't even consider how bad it is. It's like unthinkable. And people, they just want to be able to go out, live their lives, have economic advancement, have a normal quality of life. The IRGC, Hezbollah, Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, these are all part of this one terror network that's just holding the entire region and even the entire world to a certain extent hostage.
Alex, you mentioned misinformation. Another issue here, potential misinformation being brought to us, reported by Reuters and many others, claiming that Israel is facing a critical shortage of missile interceptors. They mentioned specifically the Arrow. I mean, thank God I was driving in today and there was missile alert, and not exactly where I was. I didn't have to go to the shelter, but I heard the systems up above, all the large booms just south of Hebron, taking out the latest Iranian missiles coming in. Obviously, we all hope that's not the case, but talk about the potential misinformation here, indicating that Israel is facing this critical shortage.
Right. These would be reports of which the purpose is to frighten the Israeli public so that the Israeli public would potentially rise up against the government here to make them stop the war. Now, there's a few things. Number one, this is total misinformation. You think that Israel didn't expect that when they launched this war that Iran would be firing ballistic missiles at Israel? Do you think that Israel didn't have a timeline, how long it would take to bomb all of the ballistic missile infrastructure in Iran before they would stop Iran from being able to fire? Okay, these are all the scenarios that the IDF considered. They know how much Iran has, they know how much they need, and it's not possible that in just 2 weeks' time that they would run out. Like, how could Israel go to war with a power that has ballistic missiles if they don't have the defenders to intercept those ballistic missiles? Not only that, was Israel running low on ballistic missile intercepts before in previous rounds? Because the United States was not and Israel were not working together in such a way in which there would be the full supply of these intercepts. And we have seen reports here in Israel that the level of communication for the stockpile and supply and resupply of weapons is at unprecedented levels. And this is one of the major benefits of not doing it alone, doing it together with the United States. That means the United States has an unbelievable technological methodology for the resupply of their own military. And when Israel and the United States are working together, believe me, the flow of weapons that Israel is using, cruise missiles, other missiles to hit the precision-guided missiles to hit strategic targets, as well as the intercepts, these are being supplied on a daily basis. Israel has all that it needs. Now, does that mean that many of these ballistic missiles do not get through the intercepts? Yes, some of these ballistic missiles, a certain percentage of them are actually getting through.
Let's mention the Bedouin town in the north,
Zarzir.
Sustained a hit. I think is how many people were injured in that?
Something like 32 people are reported injured. Most of those considered to be light injuries. Light injury means shrapnel could hit a face, could poke out an eye, could render somebody blind. I mean, this is what light injuries can mean. It could be very serious. One person was moderately injured in that attack. And we've actually seen several of these attacks hit Arab villages. So you just see this indiscriminate bombing, using cluster bombs, which cluster bomb, the whole purpose of a cluster bomb is to rain terror on a civilian population because it's not targeted, right? It's targeted to a general area, and then the ballistic missile splits into 20 or so different pieces and can spray an area of with a circumference of 8 to 10 kilometers, it's a few miles, right? So it just means that wherever these things fall, they fall, and whatever damage they do, they do. So you see here, Iran just targeting population centers. Cluster bombs can avoid the intercepts because, like we said, the ballistic missile, it splits open, and then instead of one missile that you have to intercept, all of a sudden you have 20 to intercept, and you don't know the trajectory of those 20. So we're seeing a lot of these things that are falling and hitting. Now, they don't do as much damage as a full ballistic missile. Each one only has a few kilograms of explosive charge within them, but enough to kill somebody. Not only that, some of these intercepted pieces of missiles, we've seen them fall out of the sky. Even if they don't explode, you have metal things that weigh a lot. You see pieces like this, like spinning like this, coming down and just hitting the ground. It could kill easily a person or more than one person, or if it hit a car or whatever it is, it can do tremendous damage. We've seen numerous hits, but that doesn't mean that Israel's running out of the intercepts. We just see a lot of misinformation. Netanyahu's dead. Israel's running out of intercepts. It's all part of a disinformation campaign to make it look like Iran is in a much stronger position than they actually are.
Yeah. In addition, how many times I've seen Tel Aviv in flames over the last week. More misinformation from the anti-Israel community out there. Unfortunately, Alex, this is war. U.S. and Israel. Tremendous accomplishments, but here we have a KC-135 U.S. refueling aircraft which went down in western Iraq. As of this report, 4 out of the 6 crew members on board have been confirmed deceased, with rescue efforts along the way. This happened on the 12th of March here. I don't know about the other two crew members. Maybe you know, but unfortunately,
well, two are missing.
Two are missing.
Which
Yeah,
means the strong likelihood is that they did not survive. Okay, like you said, the conditions that led to this crash are not known. There was actually two refueling planes that were apparently either targeted at the same time or involved in an incident. One of those planes managed to get all the way back to Israel and land, fortunately. But there was two planes that there's a question of maybe if the two planes crashed or if they were targeted by friendly fire, even though we've heard reports that it wasn't necessarily a friendly fire incident. They also said it wasn't a hostile fire incident. So what kind of incident was it? We don't really know. This in addition to those jets that were downed by Patriot missile batteries, friendly fire over Kuwait just over a week ago. So I think at this point it's been something like 11 U.S. service members have been killed in this operation so far, which is terrible. We didn't want any, and we didn't think that there would need to necessarily be any. The war is very, very difficult. And we've also seen in Israel approximately a dozen people killed from the ballistic missile attacks in these 2 weeks.
Alex, we've talked about Prime Minister Netanyahu numerous times addressing the Iranian people directly. This week, he did it again on X, saying, "People of Iran, we are waging historic war for liberty. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to remove the Ayatollah regime and gain your freedom." And then you had the exiled opposition leader, Reza Pahlavi, also calling on the Iranian people not just to go out and protest, but to actually take action and target the heads there of the regime.
Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, he was exiled, and his son Reza was raised, in Los Angeles. He spent time in Paris, also spends time outside of Washington, D.C. It's not clear whether the president is fully behind him, but it does seem as though he is the only person that carries the weight of the great Iranian culture in the history of Iran before it was taken over by this Islamic Republic, on his shoulders. And he's been fantastic in these months leading up to this war and during the war. I mean, the messages that he's been giving have been very methodical, well thought out, strongly delivered, standing together with the Iranian people, saying his messages in Farsi, but also then putting messages out in English to let the international community know what he's doing. He warned Iranians to stock up on supplies recently, telling them that to get ready for what's coming, to stay indoors while Israel and the United States are bombing, but letting them know that there will be a moment in which they will come out onto the streets. And he also said in this last message that he will arrive in Iran at some point. He says he wants to lead a transition. He says that he is working with various operators to create a transition team that involves, I'm sure, some people that are in exile, but also some people that are inside the country. And we know that President Trump's been stating that while Reza Pahlavi seems quote unquote nice, which is not a very nice thing to say about him. He could say strong. That's what I think we want the president to be saying. But the president's saying that he would prefer there to be people inside the country. And what Reza Pahlavi is saying is, I'm not coming in to take over to be a monarch of Iran. I want to be a transitional figure which can lead a transition to another form of governance. And it does look like he's working with people inside Iran that would be capable of managing some kind of a transition. So Reza Pahlavi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump, Pete Hegseth, all like really fantastic as far as I'm concerned. The way they're speaking, the messaging, and demonstrating significant leadership.
Alex, we have breaking news, unbelievable. The United Nations Security Council actually condemned Iran this week for firing ballistic missiles. But before you get too excited, they left the word Israel out of this statement. They condemned Iran for firing ballistic missiles at the Gulf nations, didn't say anything about Iran firing against the state of Israel. So let's not jump for joy. Nothing has really changed out of the UN.
Well, I think something has changed. I mean, something has changed dramatically, which is that you have these countries, the Arab League, controls, there's a block of Arab countries that, really control the votes at the United Nations. And you would have suspected that they would all be on Iran's side in this conflict. But Iran, for whatever reason of strategic decision-making that I don't necessarily understand, has just been firing somewhat indiscriminately, some targeting of military facilities. And they hit a radar system on top of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. And they've hit some military sites, but they've also hit some, like they hit a hotel. They just hit like part of the financial center in Dubai, I believe. They're just hitting all over the Arab world. They've struck at a dozen countries so far. And this Arab League is turning on Iran. Okay. And who's the one that's actually doing the job to take Iran out and to make sure that they no longer will have the ability to threaten the region? It's Israel and the United States. So you see that they are leaving Israel and the United States out of the resolutions. It actually is a potential for a major shift. And you're seeing right now how there are actually opportunities for other countries in the region to, I don't know if the word is normalize relations, as we've seen the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain do with Israel, but to sort of unite or start working with Israel, start appreciating Israel a little bit more, because Israel's fighting against their enemies. Okay, Israel's doing their work. And you're even starting to see now some of these countries like the Emirates and others actually participating in offensive attacks against Iran together with the state of Israel and the United States. And it actually brings me back. I covered the Prime Minister's address to Congress. I think it was in July of 24. And he actually called for an organized bloc of Arab countries in the region to work together with Israel to create a NATO-style alliance, military alliance against common threats in the region. And you're actually seeing Netanyahu's leadership and what he called for back then all of a sudden coming into reality. Like it's manifested itself, what he put out there. And I think that was in part because he said those things back then because he has spoken to leaders covertly across the Middle East. But now you're actually seeing that these countries, which the Prime Minister thought could be part of a regional military alliance, no longer condemning Israel at the United Nations, and some of them even participating in offensive operations against Iran, almost side by side with Israel and the United States.
I like your optimism. Let's see where it goes. But let's turn now to Lebanon and Hezbollah. As literally the second we're getting information that there's one of these suicide drones attacking northern Israel sent by Hezbollah. It was Wednesday evening. There was, I would say, call it exceptional, at least in the recent conflict, 200 projectiles fired at northern Israel, the Jewish state, this past Wednesday night by Hezbollah. A lot of these attacks seem to be coordinated. You have Hezbollah firing from the north, you have Iran firing from the east, hitting simultaneously within 3-4 minutes of each other. So certainly coordinated there. So a lot happening, and the northern Israel certainly bearing the brunt of this latest round, as they have in previous rounds, with a lot of those drones and rockets being fired at the residents in the north.
Absolutely coordinated. At the same time, for all the missiles and rockets that they're firing at Israel, just a fraction of what we believed or what the assessment was that Hezbollah could have done. The assessment before October 7th was that Hezbollah had 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at Israel. The amount of damage they could have done would have been unbelievable. They could have overrun every missile defense system that Israel has in place, even with backing from the United States. But Israel did file them down significantly in this operation, which went in 2024. Obviously, at the time they said that that operation filed Hezbollah down anywhere from 70 to 80%. Now, 70 to 80% is a lot, but of course that would still leave Hezbollah with tens of thousands of missiles in place. And well, they haven't fired tens of thousands. They fired a few hundred. It's still a problem. But what they've done is they've actually given Israel the unique opportunity. They've almost done them a favor of giving Israel this opportunity, which they otherwise didn't have, to start clearing out and hitting at much more significant Hezbollah infrastructure inside Lebanon, all the way as far as Beirut, specifically targeting Dawiya neighborhood outside of Beirut. They're hitting at infrastructure. They are clearing out, especially all of the areas south of the Litani River. There are reports this week that the IDF would even maybe go so far as conquering all of the lands from the Israeli border up to the Litani River, which actually many say would be a very natural border, geographic border, a significant river, land border between Lebanon and Israel, that Israel might take over this territory, which has just been used for decades first by the PLO. Okay, almost 50 years ago, the PLO was using South Lebanon as a staging ground for terror attacks. And we've just seen Israel and first the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and then later Hezbollah, at war almost over many decades, many times, over this strategic tract of land that has been used as staging ground for attacks against Israel. Israel keeps filing them back and then withdrawing from the territory. And then they come back in. We saw that the UNIFIL was established, this UN force in Lebanon, which is supposed to prevent Hezbollah from using southern Lebanon as a staging ground. But what do? They just prevent Israel from attacking. When Israel signed this ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah in, I believe it was November of 2024, the Lebanese army was supposed to dismantle Hezbollah, demilitarize Hezbollah south of the Litani River. They cannot do it. Only the IDF can do it. And at a certain point, you want Israel to not just file down Hezbollah's capabilities, but to eliminate Hezbollah completely as a military threat, and recognizing that you don't have a better time to do this than now. Okay, Israel was happy to stay out of it if Hezbollah was deterred, but obviously Hezbollah is not deterred. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fired 200 missiles at Israel on Wednesday and continued to fire over the last several days. So the IDF has no choice but to go in and to attack. Right now, they're only using 20% of their planes in Lebanon because they're using 80% of their air power in Iran. And the question is whether Israel is going to launch a ground operation. If you listen to Israel Katz, who's the defense minister, he's making indications that Israel is going to launch a ground operation. If they do that, I think they will want to divert more of the Air Force to Lebanon in order to have the proper backing of the ground troops. And certainly, when ground troops get involved, that's when things can get a lot more dangerous for Israeli soldiers, right? Because you're going to be in live combat with terrorists that have booby-trapped an area for a long time, waiting for the moment when the IDF would come in. So it could be a dangerous situation, but it could also be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to file down Hezbollah once and for all.
Yeah, on that note, reports coming out even this morning that Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly tapped former minister and longtime advisor Ron Dermer to hold direct talks with the Lebanese government. So this just came out here a few minutes ago, Alex.
Yeah, we saw that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in Lebanon a couple days ago, calling for there not to be a ground operation, calling for all sides to stop the aggression. You see Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, saying that he doesn't want to see Lebanon, a country that has close ties to France, to be really destroyed if Israel will go through and try to root out Hezbollah. It's interesting to see why Israel would be even willing to entertain the notion of negotiations with Lebanon. I mean, first of all, which party are you negotiating with, right? In the ceasefire that was called in November 2024, that was a ceasefire signed between Israel and Lebanon was supposed to disarm Hezbollah, but Hezbollah wasn't a party to the agreement. Right. So who are you signing an agreement with? Are you signing an agreement with Hezbollah? It doesn't seem like you are. And why are you willing to negotiate at all? At this point, like we said, Israel has a once in a generation opportunity to take out Hezbollah once and for all. Why would you want to end this in a negotiation? Even though it's a dangerous situation, you're basically potentially freeing Lebanon from the hold of Hezbollah, and then you're also creating the circumstances where Israelis in the north can live in peace and security for years if you take out Hezbollah. So why on earth would you be engaging in a negotiation to begin with. Now, of course, if you are going to send somebody on a negotiation, the best person to send is Ron Dermer. He's the most capable Israeli diplomat. He is Prime Minister Netanyahu's most trusted advisor. He was until recently the Minister of Strategic Affairs. He resigned his post, but now he's been essentially called back up to be a special envoy for the Prime Minister, a former ambassador to the United States for many years. I would trust him more than I would trust anybody else in any of these circumstances. Now, people are talking about potentially a negotiation where Lebanon would formally recognize the state of Israel. And that's great. And you should have normalization with Lebanon. You should have normalization with Syria. You should have normalization with Iran at the end of this war. But if Hezbollah is still going to operate inside that country, even if the government of Lebanon normalizes relations with the government of Israel, that doesn't mean that Hezbollah is a party to that agreement. And it doesn't mean that Lebanon and the Lebanese army have the strength and the force to prevent Hezbollah from opening up another round of attacks, if not in the next months, then in the years ahead. So, I think that the concept is a good concept, but you'll be more likely to reach a negotiation and a normalization agreement that is meaningful if all sides agree that Israel and the United States can first go in, do the dirty work, and take out Hezbollah once and for all. And I would even suggest take all that territory up to the Litani River, because it's been proven over and over again. Lebanon cannot prevent terrorist organizations. UNIFIL cannot prevent terrorist organizations. It's a natural border of the Litani River. And the same way that Israel controls now 50% of the Gaza Strip, you're hearing the defense minister, Israel Katz, stating that Israel's going to do to southern Lebanon the same thing that they did to Gaza and potentially take territory.
So that's why over the last several days, you heard different officials weighing in, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who said that Hezbollah must be vanquished once and for all. He gave essentially an assessment of the war in terms of what's happened so far. He also pointed out that the Hezbollah ceasefire in 2024 was due to threats by the Biden administration that there would be a weapons embargo against the state of Israel. And that's where we are today.
Yeah, he also said that Israel was afraid of a UN Security Council resolution, that would make conditions for Israel much harder, and that the Biden administration was basically forcing the ceasefire on Israel. So I think Israel did an amazing job of filing down Hezbollah as much as they did, but you see immense pressure on Israel at that time to sign the ceasefire agreement. Smotrich also talked about other constraints and resource constraints, and you're not only talking about the threats of a further weapons embargo, but slow rolling of weapons and supplies and probably missile defense into that Israel didn't necessarily have at that time what they needed to sustain a longer campaign, but also because Israel was in a position where they needed to switch between theaters, because Israel did not want to really be fighting against Gaza and Lebanon at the same time in terms of the diverting of resources, human resources, tanks, other considerations, air power, weapons. So, Israel was doing this dance where they were first dealing with Gaza and trying to keep Hezbollah, on a low flame. Then at a certain point, Hezbollah was firing more and more, and they'd made gains in Gaza, so they put Gaza on this low flame, and then they go full on into Lebanon. But you saw again that the Biden administration put a lot of pressure on Israel to stop at that time. Another constraint was obviously that Israel wanted to get the hostages out of Gaza. So they wanted to get back into that Gaza theater so that they could put pressure on Hezbollah and the international community to get the hostages out. And the Biden administration did try to get the hostages. They were engaged in that, but their problem was that they were putting the pressure on the wrong side. When you see that the United States is putting pressure on Israel to stop fighting in Lebanon, that when the United States is putting pressure on Israel, threatening UN Security Council resolutions and arms embargoes, that just empowers Hezbollah. That just empowers Hamas. It makes them want to dig down harder. It doesn't make them want to give up the hostages. What President Trump did, very important. He has done many things differently than the Biden administration. First thing is he reversed the pressure. Okay, he put the pressure on all of the neighboring countries that were supporting Hamas and Hezbollah in this war to withdraw that support and to actually put pressure on Hamas and Hezbollah. Then you also see the rapid resupply to the point where now it's continuous supply. And now the third thing, of course, is actually participating. We saw that back in June with the Operation Midnight Hammer when the United States bombed the Fordo nuclear reactor deep underground. And now this joint operation, which is really just, I think, the pinnacle, the apex of the U.S.-Israel relationship being realized right before our eyes. These two, like what Pete Hegseth said in the beginning, we put that quote, where Iran, the enemy of the United States, the enemy of Israel, the country that's been saying death to Israel, death to the United States, when they're looking up in the sky, they are only seeing the stars and stripes and the Star of David together. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's going to be the image of the war, please God, when we have a complete victory there. And by the way, Finance Minister Smotrich, his son, was one of the 8 soldiers last week injured in a Hezbollah drone strike in the north.
I think he's still in the hospital.
Yeah.
He was, they said, moderately injured, but I think the prognosis is that
he's going to be okay.
We just heard booms overhead.
Booms overhead. My phone's off. Your phone, I don't know, but this is our reality right now. Switching to another issue which has been in the news now for a very long time. The military advocate general over the weekend announced he was dropping the indictments in the Stay Tehran affair, according to the IDF. If you remember, 5 IDF reservists indicted in February of 2025, serving in the Force 100, a unit of the military police responsible for the Nukhba Hamas terrorists, high-risk security prisoners, and they were held in July in a case concerning the alleged abuse of a Gazan detainee at the Stay Tehran military detention facility in southern Israel. So the case is over and charges have been dropped.
Well, if we look back at this case, this was very important. Stay Tehran was the military prison that was set up. It's very close to the border with Gaza. And, on October 7th, many terrorists were killed, in Israel. Many were arrested, okay? And then many people were arrested in the early weeks and months of the war, and they were brought to this makeshift prison that was set up in Stay Tehran, okay? And there was a video that circulated which purported, and you did see Israeli soldiers, you couldn't see everything that was going on in the video, but you could see that Israeli soldiers was maybe beating a prisoner. And again, these are terrorists, okay? So it was a terrorist in jail, and you see Israeli soldiers, you can't tell what they're doing, but the allegations were that the soldiers were raping the prisoner, okay? Now, in the past, I've actually seen reports that people claim that the IDF is racist army because they don't rape the Palestinian women. Okay,
right? That, yeah,
right. Like that. So it's that's how absurd that now you're going to see Israeli soldiers raping a male prisoner in the State Tehran. And so then they were saying, well, maybe it wasn't rape, maybe it was like sodomizing, that they were like jamming their weapon into this prisoner. But what actually happened later was that they saw that this prisoner had stuck his own cell phone right up in there in order to conceal it and caused damage into his own internal areas. But what happened is that the military advocate general, okay, and now the one that you've quoted here is the replacement, but the previous military advocate general had pieced together a video and pieced together this allegation, and they sent troops, they sent stormtroopers in to mass to get these soldiers out, to arrest them in front of everybody they didn't subpoena them. They came in hard and they arrested them in front of everybody. And when they did that, they created a news story and they leaked this video to the press and they made up a story. And now the person who did that, the woman, I forget her name, who was the military advocate at the time, who was working with the attorney general and came out with this. So, she is now under, tremendous stress. And she, like they said, that she had tried to get rid of her phone and then had tried to overdose on a sleeping medicine. And I believe she may even still be in the hospital. She was in a coma for a while, trying to protect herself after she did this. And people are wondering, like, why would anybody do this? And the reason why this case was brought to begin with was in order to get more international pressure on Israel to stop the war. Okay? Because if everybody sees around the world that Israel's an immoral army, exactly when Israel's trying to make the case that they're a moral army by killing the fewest number of civilian casualties, least amount of collateral damage, sending out the leaflets and making the phone calls to get civilians out of harm's way, to open up humanitarian corridors, to send in humanitarian aid. Israel's doing all these things to demonstrate that they actually are the most moral army. And here you have Israel's own deep state putting out a video trying to allege that Israel is an immoral army because this is what they do to the inmates in the prisons. And it turned out to be a totally bogus story. And now the charges have been dropped. But what's amazing about it is that when did they choose to announce that these charges are being dropped? Just a few days into the war with Iran, when this story will, by force, have to move to the bottom of the pages, that all the left-wing media that promoted this story, they're just gonna have this be at the end. And for us, this is like story number 10 that we're talking about today, when if this wasn't wartime, this would be story number 1. People would be talking about this for weeks, but instead they choose to release the information that this case was being dropped, like as Israel's being bombarded, as Israel's operating in Iran with the United States specifically, so that Israeli and the Israeli media will not talk about it.
Alex, finally this week, anti-Semitism as a result of it really is an excuse as a result of the war with Iran. You had an anti-Semitic attack targeting a synagogue in Michigan, which could have ended very badly. Apparently, there were 150 children at school in that synagogue.
Yeah, first it was a truck ramming, and now there's actually saying that there was potentially explosives inside the truck.
Yeah.
It was really miraculous. You had kids under 5, like many of them inside this building. And fortunate that it wasn't a huge tragedy. The only person killed was the driver of the truck.
Right. Okay. Security personnel taking him out there, the guard at the synagogue.
Unbelievable. It could have been so much worse.
No, absolutely. That could have been terrible. And now you have in Amsterdam, this group.
I think it was in Rotterdam.
Rotterdam, a group called the Islamic Movement of the Companions of the Right, claiming a 4th attack on Jewish targets in Europe this week. We had anti-Semitism major anti-Semitism. It's always existed since on October the 7th. Immediately after that, somehow Jews were attacked, and then people came out against the Jews, and now we're seeing it even more so, getting more and more violent with these attacks, in this case in Rotterdam there.
Well, this was the other threat, right? We talked about what are the threats that Iran can do. First, they can fire ballistic missiles at Israel. They could fire ballistic missiles across the region. Number 2, they could potentially close the Straits of Hormuz, drive up the prices of oil. And the third thing is that they could release or free or set into motion sleeper cells in Europe, in the United States, elsewhere, to carry out attacks on Jews wherever they may be. We hear more rumbling up in the
Something's going on up there.
And we're in a soundproof studio, by the way, so if we're hearing it, it's loud. It's pretty significant. And we now see something which we never heard of before, called the Islamic Movement of the Companions of the Right. I don't even know what that means.
No idea.
Hard to figure out what it means. But they're claiming these attacks, so something to watch out for. And I know that the protection of Jews, especially in Jewish communal infrastructure, synagogues, Jewish community centers, and the like, schools, Jewish schools. Security has got to be right now, on highest possible alert, because it's clear that people think that it's okay that they can attack a Jewish infrastructure.
That is the reality. Jews trying to defend themselves against the biggest exporter of terrorism in the world, and somehow people are now attacking the Jews. But we've seen that time and time again. That's all the time we have for this week's Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. Josh Haston here, correspondent from JNS, Alex Trayman, CEO. Make sure you go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news, now more than ever, from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world. We give a shout out to the people behind the scenes here, Aaron Wogelanter, Yuri Svretsky, our producer, Zach Sickerman, Ryan Lifshitz, Esther Eden, and everyone else here at JNS TV. Have a great week, everybody. Be safe, and God bless the brave men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces and the IDF protecting us 24/7 as we battle this evil. Have a great week. We'll see you next week on Jerusalem Minute.